and a little book published at the end of the 19th century by Edwin Abbott, an English clergyman, called Flatland. Let's try and explain to these flat beings.
My name is Ludwig Schleffli. I'm a Swiss geometer.
What our everyday life in 3 dimensions is like.
I lived during the 19th century, and I'm going to open the door to the 4th dimension for you. Even if I say so myself, I was a visionary.
Let's imagine that one of these lizards manages to escape.
I was one of the very first to understand that spaces with a high number of dimensions really exist, and that their geometry can be studied.
How would he explain to his fellow reptiles
if flat creatures living in a plane can understand 3-dimensional polyhedra, then why shouldn't we understand polyhedra in dimension 4?
As a first attempt, he could try to pass some 3-dimensional objects through his flat world.
One of my main achievements was to describe all regular polyhedra in dimension 4.
Here, for example, is a tetrahedron with its 4 faces.
What is the 4th dimension? A lot has been written on the subject. Science fiction writers never tire of talking about it. I'm going to explain things on the blackboard. You will see that this blackboard has a bit of magic about it. What's important is to prepare yourself to forget about the world which is familiar to us and to imagine a new world that our eyes and our senses have no direct access to. We'll have to be smart, just like the lizards were before. I'm going to climb on the top of a viewpoint that unfortunately you cannot see, and I'll try to describe what I see from there. But before we begin, I'll draw a straight line on the board. Let me just mark the origin here. Each point on this line can be located by its distance from the origin, with a minus sign if it is on the left,
a tetrahedron,
and a plus sign if it is on the right. Usually the number is denoted by X and is called the abscissa. Since the position of a point on a line can be described by a single number, we say that the line has dimension 1.
And
now I draw a second axis perpendicular to the first one. Each point in the blackboard plane is now completely described by 2 numbers, usually denoted X and Y, the abscissa and the ordinate. The plane has dimension 2.
In order to fully appreciate the shape of the body.
If you had to explain to some being living on a line what it is to be a point in the plane that is unknown to him, you could simply say, a point in the plane is just a pair of numbers. Let's go to the 3rd dimension. The chalk now writes in the air and draws a 3rd axis perpendicular to the 2 previous ones. A point in space is described by 3 numbers, X, Y, and Z. One could say to the reptiles that are curious to know about our world, a point in space is just 3 numbers.
And finally, the dodecahedron, 12 faces.
Let's go to the 4th dimension.
30 edges.
One could try and draw a 4th axis, perpendicular to the others, but that's impossible. So we have to do something else instead.
And only cross sections, and you have to guess the polyhedron hiding behind them.
Of course, we might just say that a point in the 4th dimension is nothing other than 4 numbers, X, Y, Z, T. That doesn't help us a lot. In spite of the difficulties, we are going to try and get a feeling for this geometry. As a first attempt at understanding, we shall proceed by analogy. Here is a segment and an equilateral triangle.
That was a cube.
And finally, a regular tetrahedron.
It's It's getting hard, isn't it?
Our magical blackboard enables us to draw in space.
Stuck in 2 dimensions have to develop good geometric intuition.
How can we keep this up in 4 dimensions? Observe that the segment, the triangle and the tetrahedron have 2, 3 and 4 vertices respectively. Therefore, we can try to continue with 5 vertices. Let's go then. For the segment, the triangle or the tetrahedron, an edge connects each pair of vertices. So we have to connect the 5 vertices in pairs. We count 1 edge, 2, 3, 4,
then
5,
stereographically project onto
6,
the plane of the lizards,
7,
so that our 2-dimensional
8,
friends may enjoy the spectacle.
9 and 10 edges.
Of course, we can spin
In the
sphere
tetrahedron,
around, and within
there
our
is a triangular
tetrahedron,
face
just as we
for
did
each
before
triple of
with the
vertices.
Earth.
We proceed in the same way, which gives us 2, 3, 10 faces. But if we keep going, by analogy, we have to add a tetrahedral face for each 4-tuple of vertices.
And faces it has.
There are 5 of them.
Let's take a look at the cube.
That's it. We constructed our 4-dimensional object. We'll call this the simplex. Let's spin it around in space a little, as we did with the tetrahedron. Of course, you have to imagine the simplex spinning in a 4-dimensional space. What you see is only its projection on the blackboard. Touch complicated is that faces get tangled and they can cross each other. Well, some experience is required to be able to see in dimension 4.
And now,
we're going to take the simplex, which is in 4-dimensional space, and move it gradually so that different cross-sections of it meet our 3-dimensional space. In the same way that reptiles could see a polygon appearing and disappearing, we will see a 3-dimensional polyhedron which appears, changes shape, and then vanishes.
You see the 8.
Here is the simplex passing through our 3-dimensional space.
Look how the projections of the edges are arcs of circles.
We're now going to meet more 4-dimensional polyhedra, passing through our own 3-dimensional world. Here is the hypercube, a member of the family that starts with the segment and continues up through the square and the cube. It has to be said that getting a feeling for the geometry from the slice method like this is rather tricky. I discovered the analogues of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron. They have complicated names, but I'll just call them 120 cell and 600 cell, since the former has 120 faces and the latter 600.
It's not hard to understand even for the lizards.
Look at the 120 cell. It's just passing through our space.
12 vertices and 30 edges. It's not hard to understand even for the lizards. Can you count them all?
And now here's the 600 cell. Of course, when I say that a 4-dimensional polyhedron has 600 faces, I mean 3-dimensional faces. These 600 faces are 600 tetrahedra. As for the 120 cell, it consists of 120 dodecahedra. In a minute, we'll see how we can get to know them better. To observe these 4-dimensional objects with our 3-dimensional eyes, we can look at their shadows. The objects are still in 4 space, but they are projected on our 3 space, exactly like a painter might project a landscape onto his canvas. We've already done just this with the simplex.
Now for some exercises. Let's take ourselves down into 2 dimensions and try to recognize
Here is the hypercube
from their stereographic projections. It's easy.
Of course, it's spinning in space so that we can appreciate all the details.
And 4 vertices.
Notice, for instance, that the hypercube has 16 vertices.
It's a tetrahedron. 6 edges and 4 vertices. There. It's a tetrahedron. Now, what's this one? 6 faces, each with 4 edges.
Here's a little newcomer. It's the most beautiful of my discoveries.
That's right, it's a cube.
An object that I call the 24 cell. It has absolutely no analogue in dimension 3. It's a purely 4-dimensional creature. I'm very proud of my discovery. Look how wonderful it is. 24 vertices,
That was harder,
96 edges,
the faces are
96 triangles and 24 octahedra.
5 edges start out at each
A real little gem.
There are a lot of faces, perhaps 20. 5 edges start out at each vertex. It's an icosahedron. Well done.
Here is the shadow of the 120 cell in all its majesty. A rather complicated majesty, you have to agree.
Each face is a pentagon. If we count them, there are 12 faces. 3 edges start at each vertex. These 5 solids have always fascinated geometers. The Greek philosophers attributed a magical importance to them. These 5 solids have always fascinated by associating to each of them one of the fundamental elements from which.
Let's get inside and have a look at its structure. Let's get inside and have a look at its structure. Look. Let's get inside and have a look at its structure. 600 vertices. Look. 1,200 edges. 600 vertices. 4 edges start at each vertex. 1,000. A completely regular structure. 600 vertices. All vertices, all edges play the same role. It's a pity that the projection breaks the symmetry. All vertices, all edges play the same role. Let's work your imagination a little. Imagine the object in 4 space, in which a huge group of rotations permutes all these vertices and edges. The champion is, in 4 space, the 600 cell, like a gigantic macromolecule with its 720 edges and 120 vertices, like a gigantic macromolecule and 12 edges starting from each vertex and 120 vertices, like a gigantic macromolecule and 12 edges starting from each vertex and 120 vertices. Our exploration of 4-dimensional polyhedra won't stop here, as their stereographic projections are bound to give us a better feeling for the geometry. Our exploration of 4-dimensional polyhedra won't stop here, as their stereographic projections are bound to give us a better feeling for the geometry. Our exploration of 4-dimensional polyhedra won't stop here, as their stereographic projections are bound to give us a better feeling for the geometry. Our exploration of 4-dimensional polyhedra won't stop here, as their stereographic projections are bound to give us a better feeling for the geometry. Our exploration of 4-dimensional polyhedra won't stop here, as their stereographic projections are bound to give us a better feeling for the geometry.